Hey guys, so Loco here. Doran isn't available on Monday and Tuesday for some kind of CSGO thing. And I kind of wanted to try being the host anyway, so I'm trying something where I'm the host and I'm going to talk to guests. I like talking to guests and I want to do my own thing. So anyways, what the topic will be is, even though Worlds hasn't finished right now, we still have IG and Fnatic finals to go. We actually are going to talk about post-mortem for the regions. And obviously we have Kelsey, so it's going to be either Europe or LPL, but it's going to be LPL. So today we're going to be talking about LPL post-mortem for Worlds, like talking about the 3 teams that went, what were the expectations, how well they did, and also some of the teams that didn't go and how well they might have done if they went. So yeah, Kelsey, let's start. Which team do you want to start with for LPL?
I think the really obvious one is Edward Gaming because I feel like they performed exactly as expected. So they're fairly easy to get out of the way. This team is almost exactly as advertised. They have Mako and Scout setting up most of the plays on the map and controlling the game from there. And then the rest of their team fills in gaps when necessary. They're really good at playing super aggressively, but I don't even necessarily think they understood their compositional win conditions, so they didn't even play the early game to them. So when it got to the mid to the late game, they really struggled, and then their macro understanding deteriorated even more, and they fell out of the tournament. Because of that, I think you could say that they did better than expected, but like there's maybe one game win separating them from not making it out of group stage, and then they went 1-3 against Fnatic, so I think they performed about as expected overall.
Okay. So what were your expectations for EDG before the tournament when they made it into Worlds?
So I didn't think they'd get out of groups, but I thought it would be in almost kind of a comical fashion where they took a game off of KT, but then lost a game to both Liquid and Mad and forced a tiebreaker. So it was basically like one Mad loss off of them actually doing this. So they still showed kind of the same level of comical not being able to exactly execute all the way through the game against Team Liquid. So yeah, I would say that not losing to Mad is better than expected, but it could also just be that Mad are way worse than I anticipated, and I think that's more likely. So yeah.
Okay. One common theme for a lot of the LPL and Korean teams was them misreading the meta. They were very heavily invested into bot lane, like picking stuff like Kai'Sa and trying to play towards Kai'Sa. Some teams even running low damage solo laners on both solos. So what do you think of EDG's read of meta? Especially they brought up Azir a few times, and I didn't think Azir was a pick that goes incredibly well with the meta right now. He's fine when some of the champions are banned out. What do you think of their read on the meta at the tournament?
I expected the Azir to come out just because I feel like it allows iBoy to play extremely aggressively, and then if they don't have his damage in the mid to late game team fights as a result, then Azir still brings some sustained damage, so they really like that kind of pick. It also opens up a lot of mid lane priorities so that they can go bottom. So it wasn't that weird. I think overall, though, Edward Gaming, like this is true for most of the Chinese teams, is that there is a team, they will play exactly one way almost from the creation of their organization till the end of time, regardless of how many players change, regardless of anything else. EDG absolutely will always be bot focused and always be heavy team fighting. So it'll always be kind of like a 20-minute spike team. So that's kind of how I feel about them. And I didn't like. I was really hesitant about IG and EDG because I felt like these teams in particular, if there is any kind of monkey wrench in the meta, they will not be teams that adapt. And IG didn't have to, and that EDG didn't even attempt it, I don't think so.
Why did they not change? Like, League is a constantly changing game. It seems ridiculous to hear that this is a team that's going to be bottom focused regardless of the meta from the start of time till end of time.
I think so people have this idea that Korean and Chinese organizations are really similar for some reason, but I feel like all of the criticisms that, for example, European and NA teams get for being like extremely player-centric and their organization development is exacerbated by Chinese teams just because of how like rich owners basically hire pro gamer friends to hang out with them. And so if the players don't like the coach being strict and enforcing something that they don't want to do, then the coach is like fired 9 times out of 10. Obviously, this isn't the case for every org, but because of that, like if a player has a strong way of playing the game, then those orgs tend to be the ones that are successful. If they have a central player who has a really strong preference for how he wants the game to play, he has a very strict personality, and he can kind of enforce this type of really hard practice environment by being a good player, then you have that type of success. I feel like EDG is very much formed around the idea of how to play the game that Clearlove had, separating from WE. So, and then there was a lot of conflict when new junglers would come in, like Firelolly or Haro, because they kept trying to replace Clearlove with
ideology.
Yeah, with ideologies, and both Firelolly and Haro have said that like they would get into game and Mako would say, no, you have to play this way, like you have to do it the way that Clearlove would do it.
Okay.
So Mako has sort of become like accepted the torch from Clearlove at this point, and now they just play constantly. But both junglers said that over time, like he kind of less relaxed a bit, and then this mostly came out in the junglers playing much more aggressively. So you see Haro just like constantly going for these types of ganks, even if it means like giving up farm or anything like this. And so I think that even though, you know, they got ahead in kills, they actually were losing a lot in terms of vision control, didn't transfer their vision at all. So Fnatic's early game was actually kind of better in a lot of ways. So
Clearlove brainwashed Mako, and then now Mako's brainwashing everyone when Clearlove's not there.
Yeah, and I think you can see these types of ideas in the other teams as well to an extent. And it's funny because Mako will say stuff like, if we don't take the first tower before 10 minutes, the game is a failure.
Okay.
So they just throw everything into getting this first tower, and they don't necessarily think from there what to do. But I think this is an interesting team with like a lot of young players in it. Obviously Haro, iBoy, right to an extent. So I think that this is a team that can go far because all of the players on it still have a lot of time left in their careers. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Okay. And that's super interesting to hear because I always thought of EDG as the most established and the most professional and structured org in China. But hearing that, it seems like they're just as player run as some of the NA or EU teams.
It's interesting because a lot of people thought like, oh, Nofei is coming, right? And Nofei has always played with a lot of really strong top laners, has coached a lot of really strong top laners, and a lot of his teams have had strong top laners. And at the beginning, you see kind of Mouse picking up Jace and a bunch of other things, but then he just stops, and then Ray comes, and obviously he's famous for playing a lot of these aggressive picks. But he just has sort of adopted the same sort of mold as every EDG top laner. It's almost like, so you know the joke about TSM junglers, where I feel like EDG have it about top laners. It's like, yeah, okay, I'll just accept that I'm a TP bot, I play tanks, I play Poppy, I play Ornn, and they slowly break over time.
Okay, so I guess the comparison would be TSM's Bjergsen breaks junglers and EDG's whatchamacallit, Clearlove breaks top laners.
Yeah, there you go. Just they know that that guy is never coming to their lane. They just have to slowly accept it.
Moving on from
they're on their own.
Moving on from EDG, I think the other obvious team is RNG. What was your expectation of them before Worlds started and after we cracked it open, and how they performed? Like, yeah, give me your thoughts on that.
So yeah, my expectation. So my favorite iteration of RNG is actually the 131 RNG, and we saw a lot of this RNG before UZI rejoined the team when it was like Looper and Mata, and then even after UZI joined the team, and then after you had Lemmy and Ming coming on. Like if you go back and you look at the champion pool in 2017 spring of Lemmy compared to the champion pool of Worlds, it's a really, really stark contrast. Like his top picks were like Camille, Kled, and this was also a time where everyone was playing a lot of Nautilus and Maokai and stuff in the LPL, a lot of the top laners, so his champion pool was even an anomaly in the context of the meta. And so now he comes in and he's just playing all tanks, and mid lane is actually even playing almost all tanks.
Mm-hmm.
And RNG again was originally like formed around MLXG and Xiaohu, and they were sort of the stars, this mid jungle duo. So my favorite iteration of RNG was like this 1-3-1 team. So until the end, I basically had faith that this was a team that could adapt and could understand. But then like they went all the way back to applying the same analogy, Royal Club from 2013. It's like
Protect the
this
puppy.
organization.
Yeah.
This organization is established. This organization plays the same way around its star player that all Chinese organizations play. And it's just like, I don't know what happened to the staff or whatever and this team. I wonder if like Firefox had more control in getting the players to play certain styles, because I feel like mid was very important to this team even last year at Worlds. But then obviously here it was nope, we're only playing Galio, we're only playing Sion, some Lysandra maybe with Aftershock, and then everything is all on UCI.
What do you think caused that? So from someone that doesn't know China very well, whenever I see Uji, he actually seems super humble, especially recently, where he's like very humble, very polite, but maybe there's more to that. And also knowing Kedsman a little bit, Kedsman's a very player-focused coach. Yeah, and
Sure.
he a lot about players feeling comfortable and players enjoying and believing in themselves when they are playing. I'm not sure how much of that is still true or how much that coaching style exists, but yeah, like from outside point of view, like I quite don't understand if they had success as a 1-3-1 team, why they would revert back into being a Uzi focused team. Do you have any theories, or can you shed any light on like, yeah, what the fuck happened if they were so strong as 1-3-1? Why did they suddenly become bot focused again?
Obviously, UCI always has this reputation as a very demanding player. So, like from the beginning of his career, it was you're playing around me and we're winning this game, and I can do these crazy outplays. And almost every roster that he's been on, which is why I guess when this team came together, it was like so shocking to me that he was just playing the Varus and let me play Jace and setting up the map like this. So it was really weird to see. It was like a slow decay over time of this setup. It just got worse and worse, and then this is the 2018 World's final form, and it could just be that like all of the attention in the media and everything kind of got to his head and gave him more and more power because he'd won everything. Like even when he wasn't RNG, he was winning at Asian Games, at All Stars, everything like this. So it's very strange to me that this happened. I would guess maybe because you see all that content that came out during MSI after they were losing, and how much attention that Kesman and Hart had to give him like solo to kind of calm him down. I wonder if over time he just became more and more demanding. Maybe their scrims when they played 1-3-1 weren't going as well because of like Xiaohu and Let Me were having a bad tournament. A lot of people were saying stuff like, well, maybe if the Tai were playing, they'd have a better chance. You know, like if their other top laner could play, they'd have a better chance. But again, like Let Me, when he first came on the scene, he was known for his Aurelia in like 2015. So it's really interesting to me to see them just go this route. I obviously can't know for certain about everything that happened, but it's just a really weird sort of view. And obviously from group stage, when they were playing like this, it should have been obvious that they would continue to kind of play like this. But yeah, it was just really weird for me.
Okay. What if they had a middle of class AD? He's middle of the pack AD. He's like middle at everything. He's like an average carry, an average utility player, average micro, average macro, instead of Uzi. So they lose their strength in having the best AD in the world, but they gain flexibility in terms of not having to play to this lane 24/7. How far do you think they could have gone?
It's really hard to say because maybe they, like I said, I can't know from scrims if maybe they were playing like more 1-3-1 stuff and it was working out. So from that perspective, obviously it doesn't change anything. But maybe even if they could have played Abel, who is their sub ADC, who's famous for being accused by faker of scripting. Maybe if they had him in, he would be less demanding, and they could have tried some of their competition. So if it was only UZI, then maybe that matters. I don't know if it was only UZI though. Like it's so weird to think that just like this one player throwing a fit could cause everyone to change everything instead of just prioritizing how to
Trust
play
me,
the game.
it's definitely happened
I'm
on
sure
NA teams.
it happens.
It's happened
but
on NA
yeah,
teams.
yeah.
I can imagine in China where the players are even more valuable and star players are getting paid even more, and like they're being sponsored by Nike. I can definitely seeing it being possible for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I can see. I know it happens. It's just so weird to me that they would have had that they could have been having success in scrims doing something else. So I have to think that. Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe it's just that I want to believe that UZI has matured as a person, and just wanting to believe that doesn't make it true, you know.
Okay.
So there's that.
Another what if question. If they played 1-3-1, if UZI was on board, how far do you think they could have gone? Were they at the actual tournament favorites, like everyone has said? Like if they were just gonna play 1-3-1?
I do think that based on how I've seen them execute, like just their map rotations, even at MSI, because you had Xiaohu playing more early and stuff like this. Even at MSI, I believe that the way that they were setting up lanes and transitioning was just like very efficient and you didn't lose creeps, and they almost bounced every wave the way that they wanted to. Just the way that they were setting up the map in general was really, really strong at MSI. So yeah, I think that if they had kept some of those fundamentals, then they could have continued to be the favorites, because I mean, everyone talks about IG having so much success because they're solo lane focused, but a big part of RNG beating IG domestically in both of the best of 5 series was actually through mid jungle and through Xiaohu being able to play Ryze and have a lot of pressure inside lanes. So yeah, I think they definitely could have gone. Theoretically, they could be in the position IG is in right now.
So domestically, when RNG played mid focus, they were able to beat Rookie and Hith jungler with Xiaohu and Hith jungle.
Yeah, so Rookie would be up like 10-20 CS in lane still, obviously, but they would just get control through the jungle, denying like as many raptors as possible, and then set up the map so that after bottom turret fell or whatever, that Xiaohu could continuously have pressure insides, just on a better scaling pick like Ryze or something like this. So.
Okay, wow, that's super interesting, because watching Rookie play, oh my god, such a beastly mid laner, and to hear that domestically that RNG could actually challenge them in the mid jungle 2v2 is eye-opening, and it makes it even more questioning now why they didn't play that style. Holy hell.
Yeah, it's actually like RNG were the reason why I thought that Fnatic could beat them through mid jungle 2v2, because I had seen RNG do the same thing. Like it's just so weird to me. So yeah.
Okay, so last team we have IG. Obviously it's a bit hard to talk about them in post-mortem since they still haven't played the finals yet, but either way, what do you think about them before going into Worlds? Do you think they'd be the favorites? Do you think they do this well? And yeah, like what do you have to say for IG?
So a lot of people said that I really underrated IG because I had sort of the same idea about how they do as I did of EDG, which is just that they would play a certain way, and then if something happened, they wouldn't make it that far. I thought that they would get out of groups in first, and then struggle more in BO5 scenarios, but they got out of group second and beat KT, which I think a lot of people are really high on them for. I feel like KT's macro was really garbage. But it was still props to them because they beat them not just by playing a better 1-3-1 or 1-4, but also by having like really good team fighting, which was something that I was questioning them a lot. And Jackie Love played really well in the final game when he needed to. So yeah, I think that IG has surpassed my expectations, but still at the same time, I feel like the meta actually really does favor them. So they have theoretically the same issues as EDG and RNG. It's just that they're in a way better spot because of how their team is set up.
So the theoretical issue you're talking about is inability to play away from their team strengths or whatever they think is good, right? But coincidentally, what they're good at is what the meta is right now at Worlds.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of people could say you could levy that complaint against almost every other team at this tournament. And I think that's true to an extent because you have G2, obviously. If the meta turned out to be super like bot lane hyper carry focused, they'd be in a really bad spot. But they, at the same time, you have teams like Fnatic that played almost exclusively around Reckless last year with arguably a worse support. And they adapted to more of a solo lane focused identity, partly by being able to flex their top laner, partly by having Caps really come into his own. And a lot of that is just like Reckless has credited, for example, Youngbuck with teaching Caps how to side lane, because you always had the meme where Reckless would be inside with us Tristana, and they'd lose an important objective because of that. But you do see Fnatic being able to change, even without altering their roster that much.
Yeah. Well, that was something like really puzzling to me, that Caps didn't know how to side lane, because as a player that's very mechanically dominant, any mid laner that's very mechanically dominant loves being in a side lane, because it's about 1v1ing people way more so than being in mid lane, where you're most of the time clearing creeps or playing with vision. Like side lane is so much about 1v1 or who can call for jungle better, who can set up better, but it is very mechanically intensive, and that's one of Caps' biggest strengths. So yeah, I thought it was really interesting that he didn't know how to side lane and he had to be taught.
Yeah, it is interesting, but the way that they talked about it, it was about like when he can transition from the wave to grouping and when he can stay inside. I feel like Reckless doesn't even understand that, so it was interesting hearing them talk about how he learned it very quickly. But yeah, but in terms of IG, I think the Shy has overperformed to my expectation, because I think I was like under the impression that the Shy is really good, but I still felt like because of some of the macro mistakes he can make, that Duke is a better choice for them. But I mean, the Shy has just been so good, actually. He's been really insane. So
domestically, did they play Duke or Shy more?
I think so. All of spring they played the Shy. Then he had an accident going into the playoffs, so they weren't able to play the Shy at all suddenly, and Duke had to play all of the playoffs. And then they played Duke much more in summer
when both were available.
Yeah, so they rotated them a lot, and for a lot of summer, people were like, "When is the Shy gonna play? When is the Shy gonna play?" But eventually, they just had them on more of a free rotation, and then Duke. I feel like Duke played more, but I haven't looked specifically at the numbers yet.
Okay, so it was abnormal that Shy played at this Worlds, and coming into Worlds, it would have been more normal for Duke to play.
I expected both of them to see a lot of play. I think that coming in, people expected it to be all the Shy for some reason if they didn't watch a lot of the LPL. But I expected a pretty on and off rotation, and I feel like we've had that so far. But in bracket stage, obviously, Duke has only played one game.
I think it was kind of like with Fnatic, where they were rotating both Soaz and Bwipo, but once they figured out the meta was a lot better for carry tops, they stuck with Bwipo, and it seems like IG has done the same thing.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think that there's more of an argument to say that Duke won't play carry tops as well in the case of IG than there is for Fnatic, but yeah.
So we talked about all three teams that were at Worlds. Is there any LPL teams that you think would have done exceptionally well if they went in place of any, let's say, EDG?
So I expected either Rogue Warriors or Jingdong to make it. EDG making it through the regional was actually really surprising in the first place. And now, having seen how the games folded out, I think Jingdong actually would have done really well.
I don't even know what team Jingdong is, let alone can tell you whoever's on it, and I think it's going to be the same for a lot of viewers. And honestly, Jingdong sounds like a name you just made up on the spot. Can you tell us a little bit about Jingdong, what kind of team they are, what kind of players they have, and yeah, like how they play?
Jingdong is basically an electronic online ordering service, very similar to so that's just for context what Jingdong is. But the players on Jingdong are...
I'm sorry, you cut out for one sec. What company are they similar to?
They're similar to Amazon.
Okay.
Because you just order a bunch of stuff online. It's very similar to Amazon. But they're so probably the most recognizable player on this roster is Loken, the AD carry. But this team is way more about their solo lanes, I think. Like, they play a lot more to Loken, but when they allow Zoom to play carries or to play more bruiser or well-rounded champions, they do really, really well. And then their mid laner is Yao Gao. It means toothpaste. So a lot of people will know him as toothpaste. But
is he clean though?
He's fairly clean. I would say his champion pool isn't insane, but he like plays Ryze and a bunch of other champions that can sideline well. So they, for me, looked really good. And I think it isn't controversial to say that Zoom is the best top laner in China.
Over Shy.
So, over the Shy, yeah.
So the Shy, who we're seeing to be the best top laner at Worlds, actually has someone that could play better than him in Zoom.
Yeah, I think it's a bit split as to whether you prefer Zoom or the Shy, but I feel like Zoom is actually so crazy because he can play, like the Shy will really, really strictly play side laning champs, but Zoom often ends up on teamfight duty, but he can also like actually just destroy the Shy straight up in lane sometimes. So I think Zoom is really, really strong and really good, and when the team does play to him, they look their best for sure. So that's why I think that this is a team that probably could have done better than EDG. And then Yao Gao is probably not as good as Zoom, but he's part of the new sort of the next generation of mid lane talent after Xiaohu and Xia, which is basically Yao Gao and Knight, who is the Chinese player who's like almost perpetually number one on Korean solo queue ladder. So yeah, Yao Gao is I think Knight is better, but Yao Gao is also very good. So I think that Jingdong could have done pretty well. I don't think they would have beaten Fnatic, but they would have, the meta would have suited them more, and I think that they could show more dimension than EDG.
Okay, that's interesting to think that. I didn't think EDG was that great at the tournament, and there was definitely teams that were better that could have gone from China, because China is very much about this kind of meta, like solo laners. I guess they've been more about bot laners time to time, but I did expect a lot of strong team fight, strong skirmishes from China. But to hear that there's a top laner that's potentially better than the Shy that didn't go is really fucking scary to think about even.
Yeah, I actually, I mean, I think Zoom is actually so good. He was a rookie this year, so I think he's going to be an insane player next year. So.
Okay, now to finish up, let's talk about the region as a whole. And because the finals haven't happened, we kind of have to talk about it in two case scenarios where IG wins and where IG doesn't win. Let's start with the more, in my opinion, the least likely outcome if IG doesn't win. If IG doesn't win at finals, like post-mortem for China, what's your point of view on how they did compared to how you thought they were going to do?
Really? You think it's least likely IG doesn't win?
Yeah, I think it's more likely IG does win, but that's for another show.
1-2 against Fnatic. All right. I'll have to that episode. So I think for me, the post-mortem for China will be that the problem their teams have came out really clearly, even if IG does well, which is that they don't adapt in general. Like their organizations are very definitive about what kind of identities they have. There were 2 articles published on Envin. Inven, one was after Worlds last year and one was after Rift Rivals this year, and the tone of this article is, this is why China is better than Korea, or this is why China is not better than Korea. And the one after Worlds where they said, well, the meta should have suited them, they should have been able to beat Korea, they focused a lot on, well, these are very player-run organizations, they don't practice much, usually their scrim blocks are like 2 games, and then they will have like 2 scrim blocks or something, so they practice very little, the coaches aren't given a lot of respect. And most of these articles were published with anonymous sources, and then they published another article which was like, well, it's actually much better this year after Rift Rivals, and we're given so much more control, and obviously if you're a new coach, that's probably not the same, but if you're an experienced coach, then players will respect you. But the difference between these 2 articles was that the second one was published with quotes from Hart and Kesman and IG's coach, and
Mafa.
Nofe.
Mafa
and not Mafa. I forget
Comet.
the name of
no, not
their other coach here.
He's the one from Dignitas. He's the one from Dignitas. The old one for Kim, Coach Kim.
Yeah. Maybe.
It has to be. I'm pretty sure it's Coach Kim for IG. We can.
Yeah. It is Coach Kim. You're right. I always think of Malfa, but he's not the one on stage for them.
Yeah.
but Mafa has been with them for a really long time. So they were all published like as named sources, and they said, well, it's really not like that anymore. But okay, if these guys know their name is going to go in the article, they don't want to lose their jobs, right? So it's very different from like allowing coaches to come forward as anonymous sources.
But wait, are you implying the anonymous sources were the same coaches that were named in the second article?
Oh, I'm not implying that they're the same ones. I'm implying that, like, if you're anonymous and you're talking to a journalist and you're told that you'll be an anonymous source and your name won't be printed and you can say whatever, you're going to speak much more freely, because your org isn't going to read that article and say, you're fired. You shit talk me like this, like whatever. But obviously in the article where the coaches are named, they're not going to be as, yeah, we have no control. Like the players just complain to the organization and we get fired instantly and all this stuff. They're not going to say the same shit. They're going to say, no, really, it improved a lot. And that's why we're beating you guys. So, yeah, totally. It's all good. It's job security is awesome. No, but that's why, to me, I find it a little bit suspicious that they said that these conditions really improved, because these are problems that I was aware of even in like 2015, 2016. I did a lot of interviews and investigative work talking about just like the, in general, really, really shit scrum culture. And I imagine it has gotten like a lot better from there, because there was all sorts of bullshit going on 2015 and prior where players were not even playing their actual roles in scrims.
So I'll actually tell you exactly what went on. It's pretty easy to see from an outside perspective, from someone that has a lot of coaching experience. Winning solves everything. Winning solves everything in a team. So I could be doing the exact same thing, and if we're winning, my players will say, oh yeah, we love this, like we love doing this, like this is great. And if you start losing, I could be doing the exact same thing when we were winning, and I'd be getting comments like, this is fucking bullshit, like why the fuck do we have to do this, like this isn't important at all. Where it is the exact same concept and the exact same routine, but just due to winning or losing, like players change their mind on things, and whether it's required or whether it's even good. So it seems like when they were losing, the coaches didn't get respect and players didn't like them, and when they were winning, players liked them. Seems pretty simple to me.
Yeah, I agree that it's simple, and probably there was something after where the orgs came in and tried to give more power to the coach, but then it was very superficial in the sense that as soon as they start losing, the players start bullshitting and like complaining and not listening again, and then there's no reinforcement. So yeah, I would assume that it is something like that.
Okay. So in the case that IG does win, then what do you think the post-mortem for China, and like how the region looked overall coming into Worlds, and like the result of it, like how would you feel about it? And yeah,
I'm actually really worried about the potential impact that it will have on LPL as a region if IG wins.
If they win, holy shit.
Yeah, I actually think it's potentially worse for LPL as a region if IG wins, because the impact of Starhorn Royal Club winning Season 4 with 2 Korean imports was that every team got imports, and there was huge sponsorship deals available from streaming companies for Korean players coming in, and then a lot of this just like reinforced a lot of the player-centric nature, because it's, oh, we can get carried by star Korean players, you know, we just get carried by Korean players and then we win. And I feel like IG, like the impact that RNG made by focusing stuff more on macro and by making sure there's good communication in the team and the roster, well, and a lot of teams looking more and more into Chinese players, because also Top ended up benching like Gung and Marin and working with Korn, and they started winning like with Korn of all people. I'm sure you remember Korn, even though you didn't know his name going into the 2014 World Championship.
Damn, you bag on me for that. Like, I think this is like the third or fourth time. Like, you really remember me not remembering his name.
I don't know why, it just sticks out to me. It's really funny. But I don't blame you, honestly, for not knowing who Korn is, because he's not that great. But like, they found more success working with like Korn and a Chinese top laner than they did working with Marin and Gung. So I think that showed a lot of organizations looking at investing more in talent. Obviously, LDL has gotten a lot bigger. You're seeing all sorts of like young Chinese rookies coming into the scene now, and I kind of am worried that if IG wins, it basically just sends a message that all you need is like insane Korean players like Rookie and the Shy, and you win Worlds, and then a lot of organizations investing in their own talent will go by the wayside, which is why I think the bigger message for IG winning is that this team was garbage for so long, even with Rookie.
Mm-hmm.
And last year they added a bunch of rookies. They added Ning, they added the Shy, who was a rookie, and then they went through 80 carries until they were able to add Jockey Love because he came of age, and they had that player on the org for ages, actually for 2 years basically, until he could turn 17. And I kept trying to get him in earlier because everyone knows birth certificates don't count. But he couldn't play until he was 17, and then this is the year that they go to Worlds, and I think that should be more the narrative. And the underline is that even when you have like the insane Korean players, if you're actually investing in the right kinds of talent and bringing up like the right kinds of talent in your organization, you're not even going to get to a place where they can theoretically carry you or however you want to look at it. So that's sort of my concern for IG's success. If IG don't win, I feel like you probably still have some of the same overtones. So, but it just because they made it to the final, so it really depends.
Well, to talk about that a little bit, like imports are being looked at a lot less heavily in North America, and I think this year North America didn't import a single new Korean. Everyone that was here was already here from before, and we're pretty much in the idea of you can't just bring in a Korean, like they have to want to come here, they have to form well with the North American community, North American players, and the kind of the culture here in North America. And it seems like China also went through the same thing, where I'm not sure if they didn't get any single new Korean, but the teams did feel a lot more Chinese player focused, and it wasn't as heavily reliant on import. Do you think IG winning has potential to destroy all of that, even if like China made progress in terms of raising its new talent and investing into it and seeing success with that? Do you think that one result can just destroy all that?
I think that it depends on how the narrative is trained, because I think that the way that the Chinese casters and the community frames the narrative will really matter, especially if there's a lot of flaming of like Ning or Baolan or stuff like this by the Chinese journalists or things like this, and I think that could look really unfavorably on the investments that IG made. But if the narrative is positive and talks about how IG actually had to go through so many iterations of a roster, and a lot of the times when they were just like throwing players in, when they were having Kid play jungle, when they were doing like when they had a Rain, who is probably one of the worst imports anywhere ever, playing 80 carry, none of this stuff was working. Like they switched Rookie to 80 carry once, for fuck's sake.
Jesus Christ.
So, none of that stuff worked. It only got to this point where they actually were scouting good talent and scouting like younger players. Like the Shy had been in the scene for ages because he famously went over to China as a 15-year-old to stream on WE. So I think that, and they, when they signed a bunch of 80 carries at the end and before summer of last year, they signed like almost all the ones with promise, like West, Ning, who was previously an 80 carry but had been playing jungle for a split, and then they re-signed Jockey Love. So they were really looking for talent. And then like the way that Chinese orgs are actually investing in 80 carries right now is pretty crazy, because you have RNG signing Abel as soon as he's able to play on stage. You have IG signing Jockey Love like 2 years before he can play on stage. You have Eder Gaming signing iBoy a year before he can play on stage. So there are a lot of organizations who are at least really looking for players in certain roles, and I really think that needs to be encouraged, so hopefully it will be.
I don't think there's any chance that this video makes it in front of the Chinese audience, but at least we can hope. Alright, thanks for joining me on a Doran versus Loco show.